Say we just give it probably another minute or two, let folks get into the meeting and we can start. Well, welcome, folks. So we have today our virtual residency info session number 2. My name is Joanne Yanez. I'm the executive director for the AANMC, and I have some esteemed colleagues who are going to be sharing their brain space with you today. I'm really excited for this and happy to have you all. So the presenters we have with us today are Dr. Gary Garcia, who is the Director of Graduate and Community Medicine at Bastyr, Dr. Dee Saunders, Program Director, Graduate Medical Education at NUNM, Dr. Joseph Vasquez will be in and out. He'll be popping in just a moment. From SCNM, Dr. Jasmine Carino, Associate Dean Curriculum, Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, and Dr. Kevin Barnett from SCNM, who is the new residency director. So help me welcome all of our guests today. We will all be available for the presentation and then for Q&A afterwards. So just a little bit of housekeeping. You are all, please stay muted. We may have you unmute during question and answer, but please, for the component of now, please stay muted. We will be recording this. We are recording this. So if you're not able to catch all of it, or you have friends of yours who want to hear the webinar today after the fact, we're happy to send that recording out, and it will be posted on the AANMC website. If you have any technical difficulties, there is an email address, events@aanmc.org, if you run into any issues. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk to you about a bunch of different things. One, the process for AANMC residencies for this coming cycle of 2022-2023. I can't believe I'm saying the words 2023 yet, but here we are. We're going to talk about how to apply, navigating the Simplicity portal. So that's our application portal that's housed on software called Simplicity. Letters of recommendation, things like setting up a new residency site if there's one that you would like to have included, and then we'll have plenty of time for question and answers. So that said, we're going to just kick it off. So I know sometimes people are a little confused about what the different organizations are. So the CPNME, our profession has a lot of acronyms in it. So the CPNME is a division of the Council on Naturopathic Medical Education, the CNME, which is solely focused on accreditation. They maintain the standards for residency programs. So any of the residency programs that are going to be affiliated with the AANMC residency cycle are going to be recognized through the CNME and the sponsoring programs as a recognized site. The AANMC, my organization that I run, is really the umbrella group for all of the accredited member schools that are members of the AANMC. So we really bring together anytime the schools are working on something together. And that's the AANMC in a nutshell. Dr. Barnett, I'm going to kick it over to you, and please feel free to jump in here. I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay, thank you. Why should I become a resident? Well, you get to see probably a lot more pathology than you did in school. Out in the regular clinics and the community clinics, they see a lot of different things, especially if they specialize. They might go into great depth that you might not see in school. And even in school, you get to make your way around different areas that you might not have experienced as an undergraduate medical student. You can pick your teachers in a sense that you're picking your residency. Hopefully it matches with the area that you want to get more in-depth training in, experience, and exposure that's outside the ivory towers, you might say. Next. So it's broken down into 1 year, usually, I believe. Sometimes there's an expectation of 2 years. It might be set up as 2 years or 3 years. A lot of places might do 1 year with optional second year. You might be invited for a second year. So every site is different. So do your due diligence and look for a site that fits with what your plans are. If you're looking for a 2-year plan, you'll be able to hopefully uncover that for yourself. The minimum has been moved up to 38,000. Some offer more. Again, you could check with what site that you're interested in to see what your expectations are. It might be different on a large city where the cost of living might be higher. It might be at the minimum in a small town where the housing and cost of living is less. Some clinics are flush with cash, and some are budgets are a little tighter, so they'll do what they can. And the benefits package can vary greatly from one place to another, depending on what the resources are and what they're able to give you. Some might be they might have in-house resources that are easier for them to share, and for some that might be a little difficult. So there might be quite a variety of packages offered. You are entitled by the rules to at least 10 days of paid time off per year. Okay. Residencies are not required except in one state so far, which is Utah. Other states are considering it, such as New York, North Carolina, and New York. Others are will be coming along, in the not too distant future. So by completing your residency now, you have more choices now, but more choices in the future as well. What do residents do? That will greatly vary depending on the type of residency you find for yourself. In the schools, it's going to be a little more similar to what you had when you were an undergraduate student, but you'll have more responsibilities to help teach and that sort of thing. But it really depends on the type of residency that you get, the type of specialization, what type of patient population they have, what type of diseases they see. But grand rounds are something very common, especially at the schools. Continuing education experiences are required. There's a minimum of 35 and an expectation of up to 70 hours a year, but 35 is the minimum required by the CNME. You will be asked or the expectation of doing some public speaking or lecturing. Education, you as a resident will be a student, but you're also an educator, as all doctors are. There's also an expectation to be involved in scholarly activity, research projects, presenting case studies, or even if that involves doing literature review for things that you're learning about in the clinic setting, not just at the institutions. You'll also be asked to participate in committees, planning, especially at the universities, the colleges. You'll be asked to participate in helping to teach other students, undergraduate students. If you're a second-year resident, even out in the community, and they have first and second years, the second-year resident will be teaching probably the first-year residents and helping them get up to speed. So teaching and being a student are both part of the picture. 40 to 60 hours a week, that could vary from place to place, typically 40 or a little more, but it could be as high as 60. Who is eligible is anybody who's graduated from a CNME accredited naturopathic school. You have to pass all your pre-licensing boards, and you need to be licensed. It's expected that at least you're licensed by the end of the first term or the first quarter. So if you're not, because there's a delay, it may not be a problem. You may be given other activities to do, other things that don't require licensing, the scholarly activities, some of the teaching, some other things that you might do as a part of the residency might be moved to the front of the residency, but you need to be licensed by the end of the first quarter.
Thank you, Dr. Burnett. Okay, Dr. Saunders.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to hit share screen. My role is to talk about the application process and really how to use the application portal that is put on by the AANMC. So I'm just kidding. We should all see my screen at this point. So logging in here and generating an account, you'll land on the home page. We often have announcements up here at the top. And if you scroll down all the way, you get more announcements at the bottom. And a big one to jot down is this one right here with the timelines. And I know my colleague, Dr. Garcia, is going to go over this, but in case you need to see it again, that's where it would be. So next, moving on from announcements, you can view open residencies here by hitting the search feature. And it can be a little bit confusing when you open it up because it's giving you these big blocks and it might not make sense that to my eyes, it's not my favorite. So I like to click residency here and hit apply. And now I get a nice sweet list of 71 sites that we have open for this year's match. And I can scroll through them and look at them. And if I decide that I really want to move home to Kansas, I can type in Kansas and I can see that there's an opportunity for me to look at in Kansas. I could look at Oregon and see, well, what if I feel like staying in Oregon, and I can find the opportunities are here. So it's a great way to navigate around this site. I'll come back to the application process in this area towards the end. I'll move on to documents. So what your job is, in addition to opening these sites and reading them about them, is to start building up your document library by ensuring that you have your resume, your combined essays, the credentials document that I will talk about in a bit that has your recommendations and official transcripts. This will be a document that you aren't able to see. It's a confidential document, and I'll show you next on how to generate that document and get it here and ready for you to apply. It is one of 5 documents that you will have to use to apply to each site. I have my NPLEX here and my personal statement, and you'll notice that I have 2 sets of essays. One, because I plan on applying perhaps to the NUNM residency, and one because I want to apply to a site called Whole Health Clinic. And I want to highlight my strengths differently for each site. This one's an academic site, and so I might highlight my teaching background, et cetera. And for this maybe affiliate community health clinic site, I might highlight my experiences in those in that environment. So you may have several documents. You can build out this document file as large as you want, just like any document file on your laptop or desktop. So if you are going to apply to multiple places, I highly suggest that you customize your essays. For the most part, your personal statement and your CV or resume largely going to be the same for most sites. You may see some need to make differences. For the most part, they'll be the same. And if I just decided I'm going to apply to yet a 3rd clinic and I wanted to upload a new batch, I'll just go through the process. I click add new. I come down here. I put the title. So I'm going to put Saunders and I'm going to say Taos Health Clinic. And I'm going to say it's my combined essays. And I will browse my computer for the file. You want all 3 essays in a single document, and there are some neat benefits to making them in the, you need to make them in the PDF format. So copy and pasting everything from Microsoft Word or whatever writing application that you use, and then converting it to a PDF, and then selecting it from my computer and submitting. And if I had just done that in real time, you would have seen another one pop up for me here. So next thing I want to show you is the credentials area. This is, by credentials, we mean your transcripts and your evaluations. And so these are going to be confidential documents. And so you need to use this system to request that certain people upload that information for you, so that this team here that's with you today will process everything into a blinded document for you and shove it back into your document library up here. So the first step is to go ahead and request 3 evaluations and 1 transcript. And we have the names of the folks to request your transcripts from based on the school that you're graduating from. And I would go down here and I would say add new. And let's just say that Dr. Garcia was my supervisor on a couple of shifts. I would fill out his name here. So Gary Garcia. Or if I was a graduate or going to graduate from NUNM and looking for my transcripts, I might enter Chris Ballard's name here. And then I would put Dr. Garcia his email here, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say for this, I do need to actually show a real example, but I want from Dr. Garcia, I want a faculty recommendation, and I might type some comments out to him, but largely the best process for requesting evaluations is to first have talked to the evaluator and asked if they would be willing to give you a strong recommendation or evaluation for residency. And after they have consented to doing so, you would come here. So this might be a nice place to say thanks so much for being willing to remark on my extraordinary success on your shift. And then I would hit I agree and submit the request. And then it would show up here as a requested evaluation or transcript. And it would travel off to Dr. Garcia, and Dr. Garcia would get it. And once he had the opportunity to complete it, it would show up here. And so you can see I've sent off for 3 faculty recommendations because that is what is needed. No more, no less, just 3 can be combined into a credentials order. And I've got my transcripts here. So now once I come to this tab, the completed recommendations and transcripts, and I see, yes, I've gotten all 3 evaluations back, awesome. And I've got my transcript back. Now I can go in and place my order for that confidential document called your credentials order to be placed. And let's just say for a moment, I had everything but my 3rd, maybe faculty evaluation. I might gently remind my faculty about the due date, or ask them how it's going, or ask if there is any information that you might be able to provide about the patients that you've seen, or specifics about the management plans or successes that you had on shift to help aid in that evaluation. That is also a good thing to do when really asking for any evaluation or letter of recommendation in business, is to help remind them of the accolades that they supervise. And then, so now that I have all 4 of these documents ready, I'm ready to go place an order. So I'm going to come over here, and I do have one complete, but let's forget about that. And I'm going to say, yeah, this is my Saunders credentials order. And first, I'm going to get the one that all of the ones that were completed in the completed tab will show up here as drop downs. So first I'll grab this one because it's on top, and then I'll say I need to add another one, and then I'll drop in number 2, and I'll add in a 3rd one here. And then finally, I will get my transcript. So I'm just going to review this. Yes, I have 3 different faculty recommendations, and I have my transcript. So now I'm going to hit submit order. And this process, once you hit submit order, this is where the normal electronic world of the 21st century slows down a hair. And this is a manual process for folks on the back end to combine the document. So we ask that you give us at least 72 hours to combine all these documents for you, blind them, and put them into your documents library. So once that is done, you can come back and verify. You're like, is it done yet? You can verify that it's complete here. And then more importantly, you can jump back to your own documents and you'll see, yes, my credentials order is here. And it looks like now I have all 5 requirements: my resumes, my resume, my essays, my credentials document, my NPLEX, and my personal statement. So I'm ready for applying, but I'm going to show you a couple more things first. One thing about NPLEX, I get this question a lot. It is just a photocopy of the results they sent you. This doesn't need to be like securing some private transcript like you do directly from a registrar. You don't need to contact NABNY. Matter of fact, please don't. They don't. The response time might not fit the timeline for this. But just take your the results they sent you and make a PDF of them and attach them here. We just need to see that you've taken and passed NPLEX 1. Now, there might be a few of you that have not yet taken it and maybe are planning on taking it here. What is it, next week? Anyhow, in February, and you don't have results yet. Okay, that's okay. You can still apply. Don't panic. You have to at least be minimally, you have to be registered for NPLEX 1 here in February. and then registered for NCLEX 2 in August to pass both exams and qualify to start in October. So what do you do if you don't have scores yet? You're going to upload a document that has a short, brief letter saying, I registered for NCLEX 1 in February of 2022, and I don't have my results yet. And you'll take that Word document or whatever processing app you use, you'll convert it into a PDF and you'll attach it here. And then we will know that those scores are coming in, but you don't have them yet. They are not a barrier to applying. So, and you don't need to contact NAVNE and make them grade your scores any faster. They won't do it anyways. Okay, on to fees. So something that you can do anytime in this process, maybe still uploading your documents, you're still cruising different states and looking at different opportunities and envisioning your future and where you want to go. You need to come before the application deadline to the fees area and just register your credit card by clicking into this link. And registering your credit card won't charge anything now, but once the application period is closed, we will take a couple of days to process all the fees that are requisite for the number of sites that you've applied to, and then you will see the credit card charge. And once all the credit card charges have been processed, then we submit all the applications off to the site, to all of the sites. Another question I get asked frequently, is there any benefit to me getting my application in sooner than later? And I'll say the benefit is, yes, to get the weight off of your shoulders, but there's no preferential treatment in terms of that site receiving your application any sooner, kind of like you expect in a normal job process. That's not the case here. So make sure you have 2 or 3 friends, edit, proofread your essays for grammar and syntax, and that you really take some time thinking about what sites you want to apply to, and only apply to opportunities that you're willing to actually physically move your body to that city or state. So take the time you need, but don't wait to the last minute. That's also not the permission stick that I'm handing out. But there isn't really any benefit to rushing it in, other than the nice little check mark dopamine boost that you get when you are done with this, which will feel great. So the second to last thing I want to cover, I think I'm talking too much and I apologize, is now I'm just going to show the application process. So I'm going to come back to open residencies, and I'm pretty sure that let's just go. I need to move to Washington. That's been a goal of mine for my whole life, and so I'm going to look at all these opportunities, and I'm going to just pick one at random. I'll pick my buddy, Dr. Garcia here. I'd like to work with him more closely. I can click into his site, and I can read a little bit about here, just some brief data. Make sure you click on this little PDF. This should be here for every site. And I would click on it now, but it's going to download a file, but it has a nice little job description. Tells you a little bit about what your week will look like, your pay. It will often tell you whether or not what benefits are part of the job, and just what you can expect overall. And I think a theme you'll hear from all of my colleagues on this call is really make sure that you match your expectations for your experience to the job that you are applying to, and definitely use your interview to interview them back. The biggest, I think, frustration I hear from residents over the past couple years is when there's a little bit of mismatch of what they expected between what they're getting. And there is a wide variety of experiences that can happen. And I mean this predominantly in some sites. You do a lot of shadowing of the site supervisor. You might do a lot of care coordination for them and note taking. And in other sites, you may just be doing a lot more one-on-one patient care, maybe don't have as much interface with your site director, and you were really wanting that kind of mentorship or time. Everyone's different. Some people are like, oh, stop, let me go on practice on my own. I already have a license and we can do that. And you want more autonomy. And then other folks want a little more supervision. So definitely use this process to identify what you're going to get. And once you get to that interview, sniff that out as well, so that it matches what you want. Because, you want to have a great 365 days. So I decided, yes, I am ready to apply to Dr. Garcia's site. and it looks like it's auto-populating some stuff for me. It's chosen one of my combined essay packages, but I should have one here for Bastyr for this example, but I would want to drop down and ensure that I have the right stuff. I only have one personal statement, so you'll see that it nicely auto-populates things that are there. And then because I already verified that my credentials order was complete, I can click here, and that's required. If I don't click here and hit submit, I'm not able to apply to his opportunity. So once I click here, it will attach that blinded document, and then I would hit submit. And once I hit submit, there's nothing else I need to do. I would be able to come up and see that opportunity that if I had just applied in real time for you, I would see it here under applications, all the places that I've already applied. And just continue working through and applying to as many as you may see that might be an opportunity for you, and then do your final interviewing when and if you get that that interview, do your final decision making to ensure that that would be a good match for you from a naturopathic philosophy standpoint and from a supervision versus autonomy standpoint. I think those two things are very important to consider when applying, and often you don't get a clear picture of that during the job description, and you need to ask some more questions at the site. The final thing I want to show you before turning things over is really taking advantage of the resources that are here in the resource tab and clicking on the document library that is right here. There's a lot of helpful information that can answer a lot of questions and also solve a couple of myths that travel out in the ether from folks that have heard the way match works or doesn't work, or all of the other pieces. I would urge you to come here. We have a great document that was just revised this year that shares with you how match works, how the algorithm works. Please check it out. There's a how-to guide here that really recaps everything I just drove through, from the fees to the credentials order to uploading your documents to searching for sites. There's guidelines on how to do a CV, and you do need to do your CV in a very specific format. I know that feels rigid, but there are reasons. The world of CVs have gotten very creative, and depending on the industry, if you're in graphic design or in English major or whatever, and just for the benefit of all of the site directors that are going to read through multiple applications and are maybe clearly looking for some very specific details, like how much did you preceptor with a midwife, if perhaps the site also does midwifery and childbirth. They want to know exactly where to find that data. So please look at the CV guidelines and put your CV in this format. Once you're done with residency and you go off and apply to a job in the real world, get as creative as you want. There doesn't seem to be an accepted process for CVs. There's just so many schools of thought. We'll put it that way. But we ask for a very specific template. So please look at that. There's instructions for writing your essays and personal statements. This is a PDF of the timeline that you can download if you want something that you can print and put these dates into your calendar instead of logging in and using the announcements page that I showed you. And then if you wanted to see an example of what your faculty would be evaluating you on, there's a form here. It's a PDF. Please, 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 please do not send it to your faculty to fill out. You really just need to go to the credentials area, come down all the way down, click add new, put their name and an email here, and they will get that form digitally in a way that they can fill it out, hit submit, and it will come back into the system. So the document that's provided for you in the resources is really just there so that you know what people are going to be evaluating you on, and really just a transparency piece. So please don't send that out. And I believe I've exhausted my time, and I am done with the drive-through on the application process. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Saunders. Good afternoon, everybody. So let's get to slide 15, I think.
Pulling it up. All right. Can you see that?
Yep. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Gary Garcia. I'm the Director of Graduate and Community Medicine for Bastyr University. And for my part in this presentation, I will just emphasize some few key points that Dr. Saunders has already mentioned earlier. And it's really important to pay attention to the application timeline. And just yesterday, I had a few students email me about when is the faculty evaluation due? Is it due on March 8th or is it due on March 22nd? When is it really supposed to be in? So I had to remind them that please look at the timeline. It's in the portal. And the due date for faculty evaluations is on the 15th. So that's coming up pretty quick. So if you have not yet requested an evaluation from their faculty, please do so. So pay attention to all of these timelines. It's really important that you keep in mind all of these. Next slide, please. So right now we're discussing actually phase 2. The top of the portion of this slide is phase 1. That's the presentation that we gave back in November. So we're down in phase 2, which is the things that you need to do from February to March. And again, Dr. Saunders did a beautiful job of showing you how to navigate through the system. If you have a chance and you get lost, this slide presentation is going to be made available. Just listen to it, and I believe Dr. Saunders hit all the key points. If you don't have it, if you are still not clear on what the next process is, I encourage you to connect with your individual residency directors regarding what next to do. Next slide, please. So you notice that I'm really harping on these key dates because it's really important. I've had students who will come up to me and say, oh, I didn't know that today or yesterday was the day that the faculty should have submitted. Then they would be asking for an extension. Unfortunately, these are really hard deadlines, and it's really important that you pay attention to this. The other next deadline after the 15th, of course, is the submission of the credential order. And this is the order that Dr. Saunders had shown us earlier regarding submitting your 3 faculty evaluations and your transcript. The only caveat I'll probably say is that the selection committee at Bastyr is requesting that if the faculty member is sitting on the Bastyr Center for Natural Health, so that's the Washington campus, on that committee, they're requesting that you approach other faculty members as the evaluator. Next week, I'm going to be sending out to our students at Bastyr who the faculty members are going to be sitting on the committee. So I just wanted to let you all know that instead of just having only 3 faculty evaluators, you may need a 4th if you happen to be applying to the Bastyr Center for Natural Health. And so submit those orders, make sure that it's in by February 22nd, because as Dr. Saunders mentioned, we do request at least 72 hours because it's a manual process. And we also have to verify if the evaluations are actually done correctly by the evaluating faculty. Occasionally, we'll have some faculty members that may be submitting different forms or just submitting a letter. We really are encouraging faculty members to utilize the form that's available online. So we do require that you submit it by February 22nd. That'll give us enough time to upload it into your My Documents. And once you have that and you have your other documents, such as your personal statement, your resume, your essays, your NCLEX transmit, then you'll be good to go. The next key deadline, of course, that you really have to pay attention to is the March 8th deadline, because that's the deadline when you're going to be submitting to your applications to the sites that are currently posted. Now, once that's done, the next thing to do, of course, is just get ready for your coming interviews. Dr. Carino will be talking a little bit about that. And also, once the interviews are all over, you have to already begin the process of thinking about your match list. I'll come back to that later. Next slide. So, some key points again. Remember to register your credit card. Occasionally, we will have students who have done everything except they forgot to upload their credit card. And that holds the process because your application cannot be sent to the site unless your credit card is charged. And as Dr. Saunders mentioned earlier, your credit cards are going to be charged only after we know the actual number of sites that you've applied to. And of course, that will be after the deadline. And the application fee for each site is $49. Now, in addition to that, of course, there's additional costs to this. You have to factor in if some sites require an in-person interview, then you'll have to factor in travel costs. And the other piece, of course, of financial commitment that you'll need to set aside for is the match fee. Now, this is different because the match is actually in a different portal. It's not on this AANMC CSM portal. It's going to be on a different portal. And the match fee is $50, not for each site, but for your list. And your list can contain anywhere between 1 to 10, 15, however many sites you wish to get matched to. So these are just some of the key items that you need to pay attention to. Again, just to come back to the very top, we've had some issues in the past. Please make sure that you register your credit card early. And if you feel that your credit card will be expiring or would have expired, please update that information. Okay, thank you so much. Next slide, please.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Jasmine Carino. I'm the Associate Dean of Curriculum and Residency Program at Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine in Toronto, Canada. So, you've gone through the process of putting all of your credentials together. You have a really good idea of which sites you want to apply to. And now, you're waiting for the interview. So just a couple of things. You will have submitted your application for March 8th, but the interview period does not start until March 21st. So there will be a little bit of a wait period. What comes into the decision for determining whether you get interviewed or not will be based on a holistic appraisal of your application. So some of the things that they'll be looking at may include, if for instance, they have a site has a particular leaning towards research, they're going to be looking at how you've highlighted your research interests and your experience in your CV as well as in your essays. The question about GPA certainly comes up. I know that a few schools do not actually have grade point averages on their CVs, on their transcripts, but it is something that is taken into consideration at some of the sites. But what is important that you will see on transcripts is whether you have passed all of your courses or if you've had to repeat a few. So that will also give an indication to site directors and the selection team as to whether they would like to interview. The other thing is recommendations that are made by the different referees that you have asked to submit a confidential form to will be reviewed. And like I said, they will take into consideration all of the factors that that you have put forward, and then you will be contacted for an interview. Next slide, please. So, when you're preparing for an interview, you're in this next phase of your career, which is really exciting. You've gone through a minimum of 4 years of naturopathic medical education, and you are ready for that next phase of your career. And of course, just as in any interview process, you need to be prepared. You have to have an idea and be very well prepared for the site. You should hopefully have had an opportunity to have preceptored at that site or have done your research about it, so that you can get a sense of whether it is a place that you would like to actually work at. Make sure that you dress appropriately if it's in person, and make sure that you are prepared, be on time. There may also be an opportunity for virtual interviews, but the option is really site dependent, whether it'll be virtual or in person. Ensure that your internet connection is solid and that the background that you have is quite professional. Next slide, please. So the question comes up, what can I do? What can I do to support my application for all of these sites that I'm really interested in my next phase of my career? Well, start building your CV. Think about the site that you are applying to, or the sites that you're applying to. What are the key features that they are looking for in a resident? And be quite fickle or choosy about the verbs that you're using and the statements that you're making. Highlight the important aspects that are really key to something that residency site would want. Show attendance in different types of rotations, because that will highlight some of your areas of experience and potential specialization. The question about grades, as I mentioned, grades certainly can be important depending on the site, but at the same time, the transcripts are very important because it really does provide information about your educational history at your institution. Highlight some of your teaching and research background, particularly if you are looking at a site that is at a school clinic, and look at all of the different relevant experiences. One thing that was mentioned certainly in the previous session that we had, and we'll highlight again now, is that if you're interested in a residency at a private clinic, please do take the opportunity to preceptor there, because you are wanting to ascertain whether there's a fit for yourself. Get to know the site, get to know the people, and that will put you in good standing for an interview. And once again, make sure that you're organized, get things done well before they're supposed to happen. Next slide, please. So you have gone through the interview phase. You have an idea about all of the residencies that you have, that you would like to apply to. You've narrowed it down to a certain number, and now it is time to identify your ranking. So the match portal is a different portal from the AANMC application site. So Dr. Saunders has gone through the whole application site. That the match portal itself is a different site, and you will be able to find that site through a couple of different means. You will be receiving an email in advance of May the 4th about the fact that the match portal will be open at a certain time, and you'll be able to get on there that way. You will also be able to get there directly from the AANMC site itself, and so you'll be able to click on there, and we will also have a hot button on the announcements page of the portal. So a couple of things that I want to say about this first statement. It opens on May the 4th. It's all Eastern time. So just so you know, if you're on the West Coast, please keep in mind the timeline. The closing of the portal is May the 11th at 11:59. And that is, it's an automatic thing. It's not something that we have any control over. It is something that the portal automatically closes. So please do not leave it to the last minute. You have an entire week to decide. Please, when you're putting in your ranking, be quite selective. Ensure that as you rank them, whether it's 1 to 5 or 1 to 2 or however number that you apply to, that these are sites that you're willing to and want to go to. And so only list the sites that you intend to accept a residency position. Another caveat is if there's only one site that you've applied to, and there's only one site that you are interested in matching, there's no assumption that you shouldn't put yourself into the match. So please, even if you're applying to one site, you must submit your ranking in the match portal. The other thing to mention here is that if you get matched and you decline your position, you are unable to reapply for the residency for 2 years. One more thing is there is a cost for the match portal, and that is $50. And it's just for the one match. So even if you apply to 10 different residency sites, the grand total is still $50 USD. Next slide, please. So this really speaks to the fact that, we have Canadians wishing to apply to US residencies, and we have Americans wanting to apply to Canadian residencies. And as it states here, it's not impossible, but it is a challenge, primarily because there's a cost that's associated with it. For instance, obtaining a visa or work permit, that's the resident applicant's responsibility. Also, the time delays in getting a visa or a work permit may discourage a potential site from actually accepting you as a resident, and because it'll impact the timelines for start and end. And so take that into consideration. It doesn't mean that you can't apply, but there are some barriers, unfortunately. Next slide, please. So the other piece here is that, in general, whether you're a cross-border applicant or not, you will not get refunds for all the different scenarios that are listed here. For instance, the site accepted you in the match, but the work or visa permit had caused delays in which it forced them to accept the next candidate. You will not be given a refund. Also, all of these other scenarios, you've applied, but you decided that you were interested in including the site in the match, or if the site interviewed you, but they decided to match with someone else, or the site interviewed you, but decided not to match a resident this cycle, or the site decides not to offer you an interview. All of these scenarios does not mean that you will get a refund. There will be no refunds for the applications. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So Dr. Garcia, you're on.
So, so after the match, there are a few things that could happen. Or even before the match, you're saying, well, I've interviewed and none of these sites that I've actually applied to resonate with me. I've done my due diligence. I'm saying, maybe I want to create a new residency. What are the key steps to do? Well, the first thing to do is, of course, to connect with your individual school residency director, because one of the things that needs to get submitted is the universal site application. We all have that handy in our computer, and we can certainly email that to any interested student who's interested in establishing a residency site of their own. And then we do give a chance to connect with you so that we can discuss what your future goals are and what the expectation is of the site. And the key thing to remember is that we need those documents because those documents that has all the forms that needs to get submitted to us, we need to get reviewed and it needs to get vetted. After that, I, for example, will submit a report to my committee for approval for CNME approval. Now, for my institution, it takes about anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. That's average. Sometimes it's a little sooner, particularly if the site has all the essential components necessary, and it's really a well-established clinic that has a strong track record of either precepting students in the past or having some informal residencies, and checks all the key boxes from a CNME training standard perspective. But sometimes it takes longer than 4 to 6 weeks. I've had some sites, for example, that have taken up to as long as 3 months. And so it really depends, because I work with the sites, and I'm pretty sure my counterparts in the other schools as well will work with the sites and try to identify what the weaknesses are, if there are any, and then give some suggestions that it can be addressed so that it can get approved down the road. Now, one thing you must remember that if you're trying to have a residency site approved, and it just so happens that the residency supervisor is a non-ND, then you must have at least a naturopathic advisor. And again, we can talk about that in detail, if the situation comes up down the road. Next slide, please. Now, in addition to that, of course, you may notice once the match results are published, you may notice on the AANMC website, geez, this site is not matched, meaning to say no applicant was actually matched to that site. What happens to those sites? Well, most of those sites will probably want to have their positions revealed. So there's going to be a post-match application process. That's also true for the sites that, are interested in starting a residency, but we're not able to meet the initial deadline, or the approval deadline, and so their positions are also going to get posted. The key thing to remember here is that the only persons who are not eligible to apply to these sites that are opening positions or that have unfilled positions are those students that have actually been matched. So if you've been matched, remember, there's a penalty to this. If you are matched and you decline because, oh my goodness, this site is right next to where I want to be, so I would decline my match position and apply to this new site that just got posted. Well, you're not going to be eligible because there's going to be a penalty to that. So these new site openings are only available, or unmatched sites are going to be available to those who were not matched initially, and to those who may be applying after the match, but were not participants in the original match in the first place. Next slide, please. So just to recap what we've been talking about so far is that it's really important to do your due diligence. We're trying to impress this upon everybody. Yes, most, if not all, of the posted residencies has their write-up, but this is a 30,000-foot version. The key to remember is that download that, read through it, ask questions, connect with the individual site if you wish, ask them. Even I know some students would even ask for a visit even before the actual application itself. Some may actually even request for maybe a day or two to precept over there. The key to remember is applying to a site is an applicant-driven process. So it's really up to you to make that key decision on whether or not you even want to apply to this site or not. Make sure that you look for these sites in the open residency position. They're not in the approved portion. Some students get confused where the open residencies are. It's where Dr. Saunders had clearly stated in the earlier portion of this presentation. Make sure you follow up with your faculty in terms of your evaluations and your school transcript. The deadline is fast approaching. Get ready, begin to upload your personal statement, resumes, essays, and your NCLEX. I know some students have asked me, well, NCLEX told me because I couldn't find the original letter they sent me. I've requested for an NCLEX 1 score, and they said it's not going to be official if it's sent to me. And I'm saying that's fine. Go ahead and accept it, have it sent to you, and then upload it. Don't worry about it. The key thing to remember is that we just want to make sure that you have already sat and passed NCLEX 1 or about to sit and take NCLEX 1. Now, the other piece, of course, is always remember to create that order, which includes 3 faculty evaluations and your school transcript. And you only really need only one order. Last year, we had several students who would request for an order for each site they were actually applying to. As you can imagine, there were anywhere between 4 to 5, sometimes even 7 requested orders. And they were essentially the same faculty evaluators, and so you only really need one order. And once the committee processes that, then it will be uploaded in My Documents. And if your order is incomplete, also know this: the committee will not process it. We may open it and say, "Oh, this looks like an incomplete." We may send you an email as a reminder to say, "Hey, this is incomplete. We can't process your order." So, but at the end of the day, this is your responsibility. You want to make sure that you submit your 3 faculty evaluations and your transcript in that credential order. And then also make sure that you submit by the application deadline. Now, you may say, wait a minute, what about those that are going to be posted after the match? Or what are those that may be posted close to the deadline? Because that might happen. In those situations, in those rare situations where a site is posted very close to the application deadline, or even after the application deadline, there'll be a different deadline for those particular clinics. Again, please prepare for your interviews. Really important to do that. Research about the site. Make sure that make this interview that you're having with this particular site the only interview, even though you may have maybe 10 other interviews lined up. Because the key thing to remember here is you want to give the impression that you're it for them. And so that improves your chances of getting matched down the road. And of course, once the interviews are about over, the match portal will be open. Make sure you prepare your match list. Have your match list written down or typed, and before you actually even open the portal, because it's always good to just have it ready and just upload, get it all done. The key thing to remember, however, is that once you submit your match list, that's it. There are no resubmissions. So make sure that the match list that you submit, which has your #1 site as your #1 site, is actually it. The committee will not allow you to request for a resubmission. Next slide, please. Okay, here are our contact information. We're here to provide some help and service to all of you. If you have any questions, you find it easier to connect to your individual school residency administrator, please do that. I sometimes even answer questions from students from other schools, and I'm okay with that.
All right, so we can go ahead and have some question and answer. So feel free to type your questions in the chat, and we can try and get to them. So question, how much notice is there before you have an interview? Who'd like to take that?
I'll answer for as far as the Bastille Center is concerned. We usually give at least a week to 10 days notice in advance. At our committee, for example, would also want to make sure that I give an orientation and give a briefing to the applicants that we're inviting for interview. But it'll vary from site to site. There are some sites that I know if they have a short list, they may call in the applicants right away for an interview. Know, of course, that this is an interview period. It doesn't mean that when the interview period begins that all the interviews will occur or all the interviews will be invited on that particular day. It's during that period of time, expect an opportunity to get interviewed. We've had at the Bastille Committee, for example, the Bastille Center for Natural Health, we've even had some occasions wherein we initially had a batch of students that we interviewed, and then we decided to interview maybe 1 or 2 more afterwards within the interview period. So it'll vary. I hope that answers the question. And maybe Dr. Carino or Dr. Saunders or Dr. Burnett may share theirs as well.
I'll just add on to that, Dr. Garcia. Thank you. And maybe to address Laura's comment, are many sites flexible with the date, and what if we can't have things move around? I just want to kind of set the overall scaffolding that these sites understand you all are in very busy programs, have clinic requirements and inabilities to get excused absences and pieces like that. So I think, just good, transparent and professional communication can go a long way. And, letting them know what's reasonable. Now, if you're applying to a site that's out of state, you may want to mention those types of things in terms of ability to get there, and whether or not perhaps a virtual interview might be an acceptable first interview. I do recommend trying to meet people in person, and we do ask for interviews to be in person. But if there is some kind of extenuating circumstances, I would consider asking for a preliminary if the site is willing to do that. But otherwise, you're not going to be asked to fly to Canada and next Friday, because that's the only time Dr. Carino can interview you. You're going to likely be given some options of interviews that span over a few weeks. And like at NUNM, usually the folks that are already local start to nab up the earlier ones, and the folks that are coming in from farther away nab up the ones that are a couple weeks out, to give them a little bit more time to navigate switching shifts, getting their shift covered, getting a faculty member to give them permission to leave early so they can maybe make a drive or a flight, things like that. So I just wanted to tag that piece on.
Thank you. Can somebody speak to reapplication and how long documents will be in the system?
The system keeps your documents for as long as as long as you have an active account in there, and correct me if I'm wrong, team. So if you choose not to apply in this first round, and you do a lot of your documents and get your evals and your transcripts and your credentials order and your credit card registered, and you do all the things, and you find there isn't really something that matches what you are interested in, we do have, Dr. Garcia touched on this, we do have sites that kind of roll in throughout the year. There's obviously the sites that will happen after the original match that don't match, and once those reopen, you can go back into the My Documents section that I showed you and grab those same documents. And then there are some folks, some sites that realize that they want a resident in August. They come and contact one of us, and they don't know our cycle. So they go through the process, like Dr. Garcia said, 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer. And then they're like, yes, I want to post, even though it's the middle of October. So we do have sites that post throughout the year. Just like you might notice right now, looking at some sites, that there are a few that are open now, currently, to start now, and they're only open to folks who are already licensed. So think about your December grads, your September grads, or maybe folks that decide to take a gap year for family or health or whatever reason. So the portal is there to keep your information for the next time.
I'll probably just add, and it's Dr. Saunders is correct. The system is there. It stores all the documents. But if you're applying to a new site, always good to update, for example, your resume, your your CV. Because remember, when you first put this up, you're in your 3rd quarter prior to graduation, and now you've already graduated, or may have taken some time off. And done some other studies, for example. So always good to update your resume and your CV. And the other piece, of course, is that the personal statement will need to get re-updated as well, because you may have been only applying to, say, the Bachelor Center for Natural Health, but this time you say, oh my goodness, there's this community health center that's actually interested in accepting applications now that I'm licensed and can apply off-cycle, for example. You want to make sure that you're not going to be submitting the Bachelor Center for Natural Health personal statement. Come up with a personal statement that's actually tailor fit to that site. So, you know, it's really important to have that, because you want to make sure that your application actually stands out to get selected. The third piece I would probably add is that in terms of the credentials and the evaluations, I believe the committee had talked about this, and we believe that up to those that graduated about 1.5 years ago, in terms of their evaluations, I think that would be valid. However, if you're, say, out of school for, say, 3 years now, the system will still have your evaluation 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and you happen to be applying to us to one of the programs now. Well, you know, that I think is pretty dated. You're going to have to come up with some different evaluations that will come up with an evaluation of your current performance as a clinician, probably with some of the supervisors that you're working with, some of your peers at some of the clinics that you've been working at. But your old evaluations are still going to be there. It's just that it's not going to be as valid anymore.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. So there's a question here about add-ons. So I think we did cover this in general terms. You need to be eligible for licensure in the jurisdiction that you are going to be applying for residency. And so if that jurisdiction requires an add-on or add-ons, you need to make sure that you have taken those. So the primary driver here is you need to be eligible for and have access to a license by the time the residency starts. And so you'll be responsible for checking what add-ons would be required for that jurisdiction. Can somebody speak to graduation date if they graduate in August?
Maybe I can start. When we're selecting for an applicant, the expectation is that you will have completed your NCLEX 1 and NCLEX 2, or be eligible to start the residency within the period that is set for this particular cycle. So my understanding is that if you are completing or graduating in August, that is likely means that you won't be able to write NCLEX 2, which means that you won't be able to start a residency, at least within this particular cycle. It doesn't mean that there won't be residency opportunities that won't be open after that. So, you know, take heart. It doesn't mean that all is lost. There will be other opportunities that will present themselves, but you know, unfortunately, if you are graduating in August, that won't be available to you.
Can somebody speak to how long positions may continue to be listed in this current cycle?
I can say that we have 4 sites that are applying to become sites that may come due still that are not listed there yet. So this is probably not a complete list that they see.
Same thing with me. I'll probably say that I know I received a question from one of the students just 2 days ago and saying, oh my goodness, is this it? Is there anything else? And of course, this student actually just saw the first 30 that were posted. And then eventually a few more were posted afterwards. And just suffice it to know that, you know, as we're trying to approve as many residency opportunities for everybody. So while it may look like we have 70, there might be a few more Dr. Burnett had mentioned that he's working on 4 sites. I'm actually working on a few myself. So maybe in the next week or 2, I may be posting some additional. If the posting is well ahead of the our deadline of March 8th, which is the deadline for the application, then that's still the deadline. However, if, for example, say I only was able to get the site approved on, say, March 6th, there'll be a separate deadline for that particular site, because it's too close already for students to get their documents ready and apply. So there'll be separate deadlines for those types of sites that are really just not so close to the application deadline that it's not a reasonable expectation for students to be able to apply right away.
Exactly. Now, after that point, we will have sites defer their start to post-match. So thank you for that question. Can maybe a couple of you talk about best practices in writing essays?
Well, I will lead, and then hopefully my peers will jump in with their points. I would say take a long walk in the woods or wherever your contemplative state is, and think about the question prompt. And I would say be as authentic to who you are and what experiences you want as possible. Because if you're attempting to write these to fit some form of example, or this ideal of who you think you should be, you may end up matching at a place that doesn't really is not a good fit. And I say that sincerely because I do see some mismatches in fit due to different philosophies and how we wield our amazing toolkit, and what the expectations are, and things like that. So be authentic, dig deep, think of some specific examples that you can use to answer the prompt, and make it your own. And then definitely, I said it before, have a couple people read your essays. And an essay can have a really great story behind it, but if it is chock full of grammatical errors at this point, with a graduate degree going into a professional field, it can reflect poorly and potentially limit you from getting an interview. Because think about how important charting is, and like in the legal aspects around that, and using proper grammar and things like that, that this is reflective of the time we put in our essays, and it could certainly paint a bad picture you wouldn't want. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Dr. Saunders, I think that's great advice. Also remember that there's not a lot of room in the essay, because there's a word limit that is there. So you actually have to be quite concise about what it is that you want to say. So absolutely get yourself in a contemplative state. Be clear about what it is that you want to relay. Be as authentic as possible, but also be concise, because there's not a lot of room to relay your message.
I'll probably add to that by saying that I think the key word really is to be consistent. Over the years, I've seen some essays that cite that this is what they used to do. And then when the committee reflects on their CV or their resume, where's that in here? We're not seeing this so-called experience. So you want to make sure that you're pretty consistent. And when you say this is one of my life experience, that it actually is found in your resume, because our committee, at least I'm pretty sure everybody else's committee does that. We always try to look and say, oh, really? Wow, that's interesting. And you look for that experience, and it's not there. So you want to make sure that you're being consistent. And of course, the other piece is you want to make sure that you're actually answering the question prompt, because we've had some great essays, but then you look at it and say, wow, that's great, but did this person actually answer the question prompt? No. So that's a red flag. So just some of the few things that I think that I've noticed over the years.
Yes, and proofread. Have somebody you trust, several somebodies, look things over, because I know I've written things, I'm sure all of my colleagues have, and then we have somebody take a look at it with fresh eyes and we're like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? So really can't stress enough, all of the points listed. So we'll probably make this the last question. This is actually a really good one. How do you set up a preceptorship or a new residency site?
Go ahead, Dr. Garcia.
I was just going to say, well, I know individual schools have their own preceptorship requirements. You can work with those parameters. For example, if you're a Bastyr student, I encourage you to connect with the preceptorship coordinators for the California campus and for the Washington campus. If that's the context of the question, that's the first step. The other one is, of course, if you already had graduated, then you're going to have to reach out to the site and see if you can shadow for a day, if they'll allow you to do that, and let them know that you're interested in their program, and find out if if there'll be an opportunity for you to visit or maybe observe for a day or two.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I'll tag right on to that. I think there's a little bit of an expansion that's coming out of the question that Dr. Yanez is leading us on to, besides setting up a preceptorship. I mean, certainly I do think about that, like Dr. Garcia said, as a requirement of the program that you're already in. But if we extrapolate that out to, how do we convert that into a potential residency site? There's certainly a lot of different ways to go around it. Based on the school that you're at, there may be a repository of preceptors that you can complete those hours at, or you've been out in the community meeting folks and generating your own experiences. And when you're doing that, it's a great opportunity, if you find a fit with that doctor, to explore whether or not they would be interested in hosting you, or I will just say hiring you post-graduation. And if they would consider hiring you post-graduation, I would follow that up with, would you consider being a residency site, so that year can be a CNME accredited year for you as a resident that you can put on your resume, et cetera, et cetera. And if you just get like an inkling of interest, or like, well, what would that entail? What do I have to do? That's when you reach out to one of your school residency directors and say, hey, will you contact, or you can join us on, email together. And then we can reach out and talk to them and say, this is what it means to host a resident. These are the requirements, and, walk them through the application process and see if we can help support getting the site approved. So your role would be getting them interested. Your role doesn't have to be the expert. It doesn't have to know all the requirements or read all the handbooks and things. You just have to get someone who will be interested in it, and then we can see if we can explain the requirements in a way that would fit into their business model, and see if we could turn that into a residency site for you. So I don't know if that was exactly where the question was going, but I was taking it off of Dr. Yanez's leading question.
Anyone else like to jump in there?
I think that it's important for both parties to explore how it's mutually beneficial, because it really ought to be residency site that's employing this resident is getting a benefit as much as the student, and when there's a good match, that should happen. And so by going through the application and exploration, or the exploration and the application, I think that might be discovered, or whether this should really happen or not.
So I put the email address for residency questions in the chat. If anyone has any additional ones after we're done here today. But I recognize it's a Saturday and you've all taken time and residency directors have as well. So I'm not seeing any more questions. So we will go ahead and wrap up for today. But if you do have anything afterwards, feel free to email us and we'll hopefully be able to answer your questions as quickly as possible. So thanks for coming and best of luck if you choose to apply for residencies. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Best of luck, everyone.